How do I read my books? How do you get a lot of ROI out of the books that you read? How do you retain information you read from books? That's what I'm going to be discussing in today's video. Let's get started. Hey folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Praveen Ramesh, and on this channel we speak about non-fiction books. I review, summarize, and I speak a ton about the books that I'm reading, and I also speak about lessons that I'm personally learning by reading these books. I find it immensely useful. I hope you do too. So reading books, it's not something that I was naturally good at when I was it's not something that I've been doing since I was a kid. Right, so I've never been a person who was like natural at reading. My mom used to read, but albeit local magazines that come to our place, but no one in my family was an avid reader. So I picked this up in the later part of my childhood because of a lot of my friends around me were reading. But I left that habit a couple of years, and then I started reading again last year, if I'm not wrong. And I found this journey to be really fascinating, and it's the one habit that I would say change the way I think, I view things, and it gives me a peek into a world that I didn't know existed before. So I thought I'll share my journey about how I read, how I retain information, and what formats do I read in, and all those things, because if you're someone who is just getting started out, I thought this information will be super useful for you. So yeah, with respect to what I read, in case you have followed this channel for a long enough time, you'll already know that I read predominantly a lot of non-fiction books. It forms around 80 to 90% of what I read. This is predominantly because of one reason. I know I use predominantly twice, but this is mainly because of one reason. The reason being that non-fiction books kind of make me think in directions that I haven't thought before. It puts me out of my comfort zone in more cases than not. It opens up new perspectives for me. It opens up doors into things that I've never thought, or it opens up doors into things that I thought were never existed. For example, decision making. I never knew that there was so much science and studies done on decision making. For example, psychology. Again, as a marketer, I always knew that words had an effect on how you think, but to think that how small things in the life that you take are dependent on psychology of how you've been brought up, how you are seeing the worldview, and all those things shape how you take decisions was very, very fascinating for me. Similarly, about all things about health and wellness. A major part of my wellness journey have been contributed by a lot of books that I've read. So it opens up perspectives that I've never had before, and that's the reason I want to be inspired when I read books. So I thought non-fiction makes a lot more, let's say, appeals to me at this point in my life where I'm seeking inspiration that will help me be a better version of myself. So that's the reason I read a lot of non-fiction books. So as to how I read, right? So I'm going to divide this portion into before I read, during reading what I do, and after reading what do I do. So before reading, here is the thing. I never read any reviews, perspectives, or YouTube videos before I read a book. And here is the reason. So there was this popular book, again I'm not gonna name the book. So I read a lot of reviews, I purchased a few books, and for some reason those books didn't appeal to me at all. Maybe it was because of the zone that I was in, maybe because I was in a completely different mindset, maybe because I wanted to explore something new. That book didn't appeal to me at all. And there were certain books that were kind of bashed on Goodreads, Google reviews, Amazon reviews, and things like that. But when I actually picked up the book and read it, I found it to be mind-blowing for the zone that I was in. So that's when I decided that I'm not going to see any reviews, any YouTube suggestions or things like that when I pick up the book. And I don't see any biases in buying books, right? So anything comes up in my recommendations, if I see a recommendation elsewhere, if a friend suggests me, I don't go and read reviews, just add it to my cart or my wish list, and when the time is right, I just go buy that book from my cart. So before I read, I never do anything like that. Second thing, as to when I read, so I try and read mostly in the mornings for 45 minutes. If there is time, if I have the time and energy, I try to read in the evening before going to bed, but in most cases I'm exhausted by the end of the day, so I just spend some time watching something and then go to sleep. So I'm trying to change that routine to see if I can read on my Kindle a bit more in the nights. I've just started, maybe I'll make a separate video on how I'm doing that, but currently most of my reading is done in the morning for 45 minutes. So I wake up, I do some breathing exercise, I finish my workout, come back, bang, I'm straight into the room wanting to read something. And usually I decide the previous night on what I'm going to be reading the next morning, because I don't want to have that analysis paralysis in the morning to say, okay, I'm gonna pick up this book, maybe this book will make sense and things like that. So I decide I just get to reading. So these are two things that I do before reading. So I decide what to read the next morning, and Second thing, I don't read any reviews. During reading, what I do? So during reading, I don't try to speed read. So I take my time, and because I read a lot of non-fiction books, if I think I've got the core idea of the book in a couple of pages or in a couple of chapters, without any guilt, I quit the book because I've got the essence of what this book is trying to communicate with me. So I don't, beat around the bush or try to beat myself to say, hey, let me go complete that book. So if I've got the core idea during reading itself, I quit that book, pick up the next book or move on to the next one, or watch a couple of YouTube videos to see, hey, if I've kind of missed out on a perspective that I thought didn't exist in the book. And second thing that I do is I take a lot of notes while reading. So I write on the margins, and I'll make a separate video on how I take notes from physical books. So I write on the margins, I highlight things that I really like. I write at the front of the page about, hey, what am I learning from reading these books? If I have a video idea that I think I could speak on this channel, I note that down as well. And mostly during reading, if I'm dazzled or taken aback by an amazing fact that I read, I just sit time to reflect. For example, The Art of Thinking Clearly, when I was reading it, there were a lot of places where I had the biases that was mentioned in the book. So I sat back to think, okay, hey, what would I have done if the same situation was presented to me? Now that I know I have this bias. So I go into these thought process or thinking cycle while reading these books, and I don't punish myself to say, hey, I need to read those 45 minutes. I use it as a point of self-reflection during reading as well. So that's how I read my book. So I don't have any guilt in quitting. I take a lot of notes on physical books, and if it's Kindle, I use the highlight feature. After I read, what do I do? So this is the most tough part, right? I struggled a lot to say, hey, what can I implement from the lesson? Because there are certain books like Atomic Habits or Think Again that give you a lot of things to process, and you are like, hey, there are so many things that I can learn from this book. What do I pick up and what do I not? So here is how I decide that. After I finish the book, I pick out only 2 or maximum, if it's full of insights, 3 things that I can implement. Most of the books in non-fiction is based on just one idea, so I pick up that core idea to see if it's relevant to my life that I can apply. Mostly it's 2 things that I pick up, and I try to incorporate that into my life. And how do I do that? So I have a Notion page where I kind of say, okay, these are the 1 or 2 things that I'm implementing from this book. These are the 1 or 2 things that I don't want to be doing, or I want to stop doing, start doing, or continue doing. And I have a quarterly review to see, hey, I've kind of tried and inculcated 3 or 4 habits in the last 3 months. Which are the ones that I need to drop? Which are the ones that I need to continue? So I have the quarterly review to see which habit should I be continuing, or which insights from the books should I need to continue, double down on, and which are the ones to eliminate. So I constantly keep doing this exercise to see which habits or which perspectives or which things fit the current lifestyle that I want to live in, and eliminate the ones that I don't. So I don't beat myself up to follow everything that I read. So that's the first thing that I do after I finish reading. The second thing is I speak about it to a lot of my friends on this YouTube channel, because that helps me retain a lot more information than I initially thought. I made a separate video about, hey, what can you do to retain? For certain people it is writing, for certain people it's about speaking with friends. For someone like me, I speak with my friends as well as speak on this YouTube video. So that's what I do to ensure that I retain a lot more information. And a major part of what I do is I have a reread list that I'm thinking I'll do every December. So December is a month that I don't want to pick up any new books. I rather reread old classics that I enjoyed reading the previous year or this year or whatever, right? Because it's not always about picking up newer books. Maybe you reread a book, you'll find a new perspective. So based on how that book impacted me, I add it to the reread list or just the read list, and then move on to the next book. So this is how I read my books. So do let me know what you think and what is it that you learned from this video. And if you think I could optimize or better my process anywhere, I would be more than happy to hear your suggestions. Do let me know what I can improve in my reading process, or if you found something that I can incorporate, I'd be more than happy to consider it. Until I see you in the next video, this is Praveen Ramesh signing off.